Hi, I'm Alex. I'm the head of JavaScript development here at Sellics, and I was asked to tell you a little bit about my journey as a software development professional and later as a department lead at various companies that I worked at, right? So to tell you that story, I need to take it back 15 years ago, where I decided to start my career and eventually landed an internship in a Flash development team. Now, Flash might seem like an antiquated technology now, but back then, Flash was the only way to build rich internet applications. JavaScript was still in its early stages, and a lot of the stuff that you can do today was completely unheard of back then, but somewhat doable with Flash. So Flash seemed like a very attractive proposition back then, and I started learning a lot about complex UI while working as an intern within that team. But as fate would have it, I did not do that for very long, because I eventually got opted into a 6-week .NET bootcamp that basically opened my eyes to the full spectrum of what web development means. So I learned a lot about databases, I learned a lot about server-side programming, I learned JavaScript, of course, because even back then JavaScript was a very essential part of the web stack. And this gave me a whole different horizon as to what is doable with web technologies. So I spent a few years just gaining experience as a .NET developer, and I eventually got promoted to a team lead position where the challenges were obviously different. It was no longer just about being an individual contributor, but also about managing people and figuring out how to help them do better. And that was a completely new world as well. It created new challenges and also new opportunities, but I definitely loved it, right? So spending a few more years in such a position, I eventually got invited by a friend to lead a team of JavaScript developers and not a .NET development team. Now, even though I knew JavaScript to some extent, I had never actually built a feature entirely in JavaScript before, right? So it was an interesting challenge. The leadership aspect was also interesting. That was definitely something that I was much more aware of now by then than I was before. So I said yes. As fate would have it, I would never look back. I would never go back to .NET again, because JavaScript turned out to be this amazing technology that we all know today, right? So having worked in different environments with all sorts of different challenges, and throughout a time where technology evolved a lot and environments evolved a lot, Internet Explorer was slowly no longer the most dominant browser on the market. I eventually understood that my focus and my passion actually lies on the management and leadership side more than it does on software development. Now, don't get me wrong, I love to code. I hacked Bluetooth into my car using a Raspberry Pi and Node.js. But I feel like the human aspect of working with people is very interesting to me. So I decided that I want to shift my career more towards a role where I don't necessarily only have a direct contribution to a product, but also I can facilitate and enable others to achieve more, right? So it became my focus to learn how to be a catalyst rather than just an individual contributor. And this eventually led me to pursue different roles that would make it easier for me to act in such a capacity, right? And example, the role here at Sellics works very well in that regard because it really gives me an opportunity to just focus on helping people work in an efficient way and be productive and have good processes in place. So you might be asking, what is it that I actually do as head of JavaScript development? What are my challenges? What are my responsibilities, right? Obviously, I already mentioned the people side, but it's not just about the people. It's also about architecture. So the role that I currently fulfill at Sellics is of an interesting mix between technical and people management. This gives me the opportunity to stay involved with technology while also fulfilling my desire to help people be more productive. Sellics has a very interesting challenge. When I started working here at Sellics, React had already been used as a technology a little bit, but it was used by two different teams in two different ways, making it very hard to share code or even move people across teams. So after I joined, I decided that we need a different approach, and we decided to look into how we could create a unified architecture that scales and that is modular at the same time, while also enabling people to work with it on different projects the same way. So we spent a few weeks in workshops. We started thinking about what exactly it means to have such an architecture. We made a few basic decisions. We learned a lot about ourselves, a lot about the technology that we're trying to use, and it worked out pretty well. So after these initial decisions were made during the workshops, we started prototyping. We started building a few things together, and my role was essentially to make sure that we stay on track and that everything works out the way we plan to, right? So we had to start thinking about a few processes here and there as well, right? We started looking at how we want to do code reviews. We wanted to look at ways to have people from different teams work together and not just be confined to the responsibilities that they have within their own teams. And we started putting in places different ways of creating an environment where people don't necessarily just have to work with the same people all the time and on the same challenges, but also can take on different challenges and experiment with other things as well. So in terms of my role here at Sellics, I feel like on one hand, it's very important for me to be aware of the technological constraints that we have and the tech stack that we're using, and try to make sure that it's relevant and up to date and cutting edge, because who doesn't want to work with the latest technologies, right? But at the same time, I also want to make sure that we can have an environment and a process where people are empowered and able to make decisions for themselves, and also work in an environment where they can cross the boundaries of traditional teams. And for me, the ability to find ways in which I can enable this is what brings me the most satisfaction in my day-to-day job. So as you can see, it was quite a journey. I started out as an intern, I did some software development, and then I became a team lead, and now I see myself more as a leader who helps things move along rather than just tell people specifically what they need to do. I don't like being very hands-on or micromanaging. I very much prefer just helping people reach conclusions on their own and figuring out things on their own and just giving them what they need in order to not get stuck. And this is quite a journey, right? It's it's a long process that took a long time, but I enjoyed every minute of it, and I would highly recommend to anyone who's looking to pursue a similar career path to just enjoy every step, because every single step has amazing opportunities for you to grow as a professional, and eventually when you get to a position where you really find your passion, then just stick with it and do what you enjoy doing the most. So in closing, I think what I would really like to also add is a few tips for people who just want to get into software development, because I remember when I started, it was quite difficult for me to find that first gig that actually kickstarts my career. So you might be asking yourself, how do I land a web developer job, right? And the obvious answer is it's not easy if you haven't done anything like this before, but that shouldn't discourage you, because there are a few things that you can do. So first off, if you've never done this, I really recommend taking an internship somewhere. This is something that I've done as well, and it basically kickstarted my career. It's a great way to learn very fast. It's a really good way to learn how software development teams work, and there's really nothing better that can really get you on your way. Now, of course, sometimes it can be difficult even to get an internship, especially if you don't really have any formal computer science training, or if you've never done anything before, you don't have a portfolio. So if you're self-taught, or if you really don't have anything to show in an interview yet, it might make sense to start looking at ways to contribute to open source, for example, because there's nothing like a solid open source contribution or a set of open source contributions to catch a hiring manager's eye, right? If you just go on GitHub and find a project that needs your help, and you start tinkering with something from one of the issues that are on that project's issues page, eventually you're going to achieve two things. You're going to learn a little bit about that technology that's being used there, so you're going to gain a little bit of experience, and you're also going to have something to show in an interview. So it's a win-win either way. The open source community also gains something with your contribution, and you gain something that will help you kickstart your career. Last but not least, I'd also like to point out that Sellics is also going to kick off an internship program for front-end developers using React next year. So if you're interested in learning how to use React professionally and working on an interesting product with the latest technologies, then feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, or even if you just want to talk about JavaScript, or about leadership, or about working in software development in general. I'm happy to connect with you and talk to you about any of these things. If you're in Berlin, we can maybe even go get a coffee or something. I'm more than happy to talk to you about pretty much anything. And yeah, thanks for listening.